Chapter 20 of Dash for Khartoum. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dion Gines, Salt Lake City, Utah. Dash for Khartoum by George Alfred Henty. Chapter 20. Found. Before starting upon their journey, the sheik said to Edgar, "On our journey here we travelled by unfrequented tracks, and it was sufficient to cover you up so that none who passed us should notice you. But it will be different now. Therefore we must dress you in our own fashion. Your hair can never be made to look like ours, and must be bound in a turban. With that and a burnous, your face and hands only will be visible. These are now so darkened by the sun that their fairness will scarce be noticed, but the women will prepare a dye which will darken you to our shade. I wish you to dress like us for another reason. You have done us great service, and though you will not change your religion, I regard you almost as one of the tribe, and do not wish you henceforth to consider yourself as a slave. You are improving fast in our language, and if you speak but little, you will pass unnoticed. Some men are more silent than others, and you need speak but little when strangers are with us. As one of ourselves, you will attract less notice than as a slave. None will say, 'Where did you get that fellow? To what part did he belong? Was he brought from the Great Lakes? Are you inclined to sell him? He is a likely youth. What will you take for him?' 'I am ready to do what you think best, sheik,' Edgar said, 'and indeed there can be no doubt that I am far less likely to be noticed if wrapped up in your fashion than if I went half clothed as a slave.' Accordingly a low close-fitting turban was wound round Edgar's head, and he was wrapped up in loose cotton garments, covered with a burnous, the hood of which came over his head. His face, hands, and neck were slightly stained, and when this was done the Arabs admitted that they would not for a moment have suspected him of being other than he seemed. Most of the women, children, and old men were left behind at the wady. The goats and sheep would supply them with milk and cheese. There was a sufficient supply of grain for their use until the crops that had been sown as soon as they arrived should come into bearing, and when all preparations were complete the party started on its way. It consisted of 12 men mounted on camels, while 2 other animals followed behind each of these. The sheik rode at the head of the party upon the horse that had been captured from the Mahdists. Amina also had a camel to herself, while the 4 other women who accompanied the party rode 2 on a camel. Yusuf and 5 or 6 lads of from 15 to 17 years old walked by the side of the camels. The led camels were but lightly loaded, carrying only the tents, cooking utensils, provender for the journey, and food and water for the party, and Edgar could see no reason why Yusuf and the boys should not have ridden, except that it was the custom for slaves and lads to walk. It was a 6 days' journey to the point they aimed at, and the marches were long ones. The supply of water carried was ample for the wants of the party, and the camels were given a good drink before starting on the 4th day's journey. They were turned loose each evening on arriving at a halting place, and left to pick up what subsistence they could from the bushes, a good feed being given to them each morning from the provender they carried. As they could have carried much more, Edgar inquired why enough had not been brought to give them a feed at night as well, but the Arab, of whom he had asked the question, said that it was better for them to browse at night, as the moisture in the herbage enabled them to do with much less water than if they had been fed entirely upon grain. Edgar was very glad when the desert journey was over. The glare of the sun from the sand and the rocks was almost blinding, and the wraps in which he was muffled up greatly added to his discomfort. On arriving at the cultivated land, the same picture presented itself that he had seen near Khartoum. Everywhere the villages were almost entirely deserted, and the fields lay waste. The blighting influence of the Mahdi seemed to weigh upon the whole country. The few natives that remained fled in fear at the sight of the strangers, and the old people they met with in the villages were crushed with grief and despondency. Of what use to cultivate the land when the Mahdists might at any moment sweep off the crops? Even should they gather the grain, where could they sell it? There were markets indeed still open, but the Mahdi's tax gatherers would demand a proportion of the proceeds, which would sweep away all their profits. What was to become of them, Allah alone knew. Edgar was filled with pity for these poor creatures, and over again thought with astonishment of the policy which, after sending a force to within a short distance of Khartoum, amply sufficient to have crushed the Mahdi and to have restored peace and comfort to the population of the Soudan, had withdrawn them when the goal was all but reached, and left the unhappy people to their fate. After journeying for some days, they passed a plain strewn with skeletons. "You see these," the sheik said. "They are the remains of the army of Hicks Pasha. Here they were attacked by the Mahdi's army. They defended themselves bravely, but they could neither advance nor retreat, and at last they were vanquished by thirst and fatigue. They were slaughtered as they stood. Hicks Pasha and a band of officers rode right into the midst of the Mahdists, and died fighting there. There were, I heard, 2 or 3 Kaffirs with him, besides many Egyptian officers. The black troops fought splendidly, but the Egyptians made a poor stand. But it came to the same in the end. What could they do against the followers of Allah?" "But the Egyptians are followers of Allah too," Edgar said, "and yet, as you say, they are but poor fighters." "No, no, sheik. I admit the extraordinary bravery of the tribesmen. I fought against them at Suakim, and saw them charge down upon our square at Abu Klea. They had no fear of death, and no men ever fought more bravely. But it was a matter of race rather than religion. Your people have always been free, for the rule of Egypt was, after all, a nominal one. The Egyptians have been slaves for centuries, and have lost their fighting power. In the old days, thousands of years ago, of which we have records in our sacred book, and which we have learned from other sources, the Egyptians were among the most warlike of people, and carried their arms far and wide. But for many hundreds of years now they have been ruled by strangers. It was not very long ago that our people fought a great tribe in the south of Africa, a tribe who knew nothing of Allah, and had in fact no religion at all. And yet they fought as stoutly and as well as your people have done here. It is a matter of race. They were just as ready to die as were your tribesmen, and that not because they believed, as you do, that death in battle would open the gates of paradise to them, but simply because it was the will of their king." "Mashallah," the sheik said, stroking his beard. "They must have been brave indeed to throw away their lives if they knew nothing of paradise, merely at the will of one man. That was folly indeed. A man has but one life, it is his all. Why should he part with it? Did they love this king of theirs?" "I do not know that they loved him," Edgar said, "but they feared him. Their laws were very cruel ones, and it was death to turn back in battle." "They had better have cut his throat and have gone about their own business," the sheik said. "Why should one man be master of the lives of all his people? Is this so among the whites?" "It is so in some countries, but not in others," Edgar said. "Some countries are ruled over by men chosen by the people themselves, and the power of peace and war and of making laws of all kinds is in the hands of these men, and the king has very little power. In other countries the king is absolute. If he says it is war, it is war." The sheik was silent. "But why should people fight and die because one man tells them?" he said after a pause. "It is astonishing." "But it is just the same thing with the people here and the Mahdi," Edgar said. "He tells them to fight, and they fight. If he told them to scatter to their homes, they would do so." The sheik made no further remark, but it was evident to Edgar that he was thinking out the problems that had presented themselves to him. For some hours afterward he suddenly remarked, "We who live in tents and wander where we will are the only free men. It is more clear to me than ever." When they were within a day's journey of El Obeid, they met one of the sheik's followers who had left the wady 4 days before the rest, with instructions to go to the city and find out whether it would be safe to enter. He halted his camel when he reached that of the sheik. "You must go no nearer the city, my father," he said. "I have learned that orders have been received by the Mahdi's governor to arrest you, and all with you, should you present yourselves there. There is much talk about a party of soldiers who went into the desert to arrest you having disappeared altogether. Others have been sent to find them, but have discovered no traces of them. So there are orders that any of our tribe from the desert are to be closely questioned. Any who admit a knowledge of you are to be sent to Khartoum. I was questioned at the gates, but as I said that I had come straight from Khartoum and knew naught of what was passing in the desert, I was passed in without further inquiry. I took up my abode with the people you told me of, and they have found out for me what I have told you. It is but 3 days since the orders concerning you were received." "I thought there might be danger at El Obeid," the sheik said calmly. "We will turn off so as to avoid the city, and will make south to join the white pasha. For a while it would not be safe anywhere here." Without further words he turned his camel from the track they had been following, and bore away more to the south. "Think you that the white pasha will be able to maintain his position?" The sheik shook his head. "For a time he may, but in the end he must either surrender or try to strike down to the sea. His troops will weary at last, even if they are not beaten by the army the Mahdi will send against them. They will say, 'Why should we go on fighting? What good can come of our holding out when no aid can possibly reach us from Egypt?' The Mahdi will be glad to come to terms with them, and allow them to live there in quiet, with their wives and families and their possessions, if they will acknowledge him and hand over the white pasha, with the 2 or 3 white officers he has with him. But that will make no difference to me. I know all the country by the Great Lakes. There are Arab traders there in plenty, who buy slaves and ivory and take them down to the coast. I can find employment with them for my camels, and can stay with them until it is safe to return. This cannot go on forever. Besides, in times of trouble, events pass quickly out of men's minds, and in a year the Mahdists will have forgotten my name. As to the loss of their 40 men, what is it? They have lost thousands since the war began. When we get to the white pasha, sheik, would you hand me over to him if he offered you a ransom for me?" "No," the sheik said decidedly, "I should not take you near him. Why should I part with you? You have brought us good fortune. Thanks to you we defeated the Mahdists and captured their camels and all that they had. Besides, I like you. Why should I part with you? What good would it do you? With me you are no longer treated as a slave, but as one of my own people. What would you be with the white pasha? An officer of his troops, getting no pay, and running the risk of being one day seized and sent with the others a prisoner to Khartoum." "I have no desire to stay with the white pasha," Edgar said. "I would rather be with you than in so hopeless a position as he is. But I might make my way down to the coast." "Never," the sheik said, at least never alone. There are fierce tribes between the lakes and the sea. No white man could get through alone. He could only do it by going with a great band of fighting men and carriers, and by buying his way by presents through the great tribes, and fighting his way through the small ones. You may travel down to the sea some day with me if I join the caravans of the Arabs, and then if there are countrymen of yours on the coast, as I have heard, and they would pay me a good ransom for you, we may see about it. You are ungrateful to wish to leave me." "Not ungrateful, sheik, for you and your wife have treated me with great kindness, but it is natural that one should wish to go to one's own people. Had you been taken a prisoner and carried to England, however well you were treated, you would sigh for your free life in the desert, for your people and friends, and would escape if you saw a chance. It is human nature to love the land where one was born, whatever that land may be." "That is true," El Bakhat admitted, "but you cannot escape now. There is nowhere for you to go to." "That is true, sheik, and I should be well content did I know that you were travelling straight either for Suakim or Zanzibar, for at either place I know that I could obtain from my countrymen money to pay any ransom you might set upon me, even a sum that would buy you fast camels and much goods, and make you a wealthy man in your tribe. But I am not content to wait for years." "You are not thinking of making your escape now?" El Bakhat asked, looking scrutinizingly at Edgar under his heavy eyebrows. "No, sheik," Edgar answered. "From the day that you captured me I made up my mind that I would escape sooner or later, whatever the risk, but I knew well that I could never traverse the country until I could speak the language like a native. I have made great progress, and can now understand all that is said, and can talk freely and easily, but not so that I could travel alone as a native. It will be months yet before I can do that. Nor, after the kindness with which you have treated me, would I leave you suddenly without warning. When I feel that I can safely travel alone, I shall give you fair warning. I shall say to you, sheik, if you will now travel with me to Suakim or some other port where I can obtain money for paying you a fair ransom, I will remain with you until such ransom is paid into your hands. If you will not do so, I shall consider myself free to escape when I can. Of course, it will be open to you to treat me again as a slave, and to use all vigilance to prevent my leaving you. But I shall consider that by giving you fair warning, I shall be free to use my best endeavours to get away." "You speak boldly," the sheik said, "but you speak fairly. Do you give me your promise not to attempt to escape until after warning me?" "Yes, I give you that promise, sheik." "It is well," El Bakhat said gravely. "I know that you would not lie to me. After you have given me warning I shall know what to do." So saying, he got up and walked away to his tent. 3 days later, as the caravan was halting at a well, Yusuf, who had gone out with the camels, ran in. "There is a large body of men, some on foot and some on horses, approaching from the south." "How far are they off?" the sheik asked as he leapt to his feet. "Scarce half a mile," the negro replied. "Then it is too late for flight," the sheik said, reseating himself. "They would be here long before we could saddle our camels. It is doubtless a body of the Mahdi's troops, but if they come from the south they will have heard nothing against us." When the Mahdists rode up, the sheik rose and saluted their commander. "Who are you?" the officer asked. "I am a humble person, one El Bakhat of the Jahrin tribe, travelling with my camels and some little merchandise." "Have you the permit of one of the Mahdi's officers to trade?" "No, my lord, I did not know that it was needful." "Assuredly it is needful," the officer said. "Your camels and goods are forfeited, and you yourself and your people must travel with us to El Obed, where inquiries will be made about you." "My lord," the sheik said, "I am a poor man and have done no harm. After fighting against the infidels, I went back to my people with such spoil as we had taken, and have dwelt there quietly, and was ignorant that it needed a permission for me to journey with my camels." "Well, if you can prove that, when you get to the city," the officer said, "the governor may take a lenient view of the case, and may content himself by taking a portion only of your camels as a fine. But if you are lying, it will be worse for you. Remember now that you are prisoners, and will be shot down if one of you attempts to escape." The sheik bowed submissively. The officer ordered some of his men to keep a rigid watch over the prisoners, and then paid no further attention to them. The sheik re-entered his tent and sat down, stern and silent, without speaking. Amina, who had heard what had passed, was in the greatest state of alarm, but saw that her husband was not to be spoken to at present. She went to the door of her tent and beckoned to Edgar, in whom she felt the most implicit confidence. "You heard what has passed, Muley?" "I heard, lady. The position is full of danger." "You are fertile in expedients. Can you not suggest something? You see, if we are taken to El Obeid, where they have had news of the expedition sent from Khartoum, and its disappearance in the desert, my husband would be sent in chains to the Mahdi, and you know what his fate would be then, while the least that will befall us all will be to be sold into slavery. What then do you advise?" "With your permission I will think it over," Edgar replied. "The position is a difficult one. The danger is, as you say, great." "Go then and think it over, Muley." Edgar went out of the tent and squatted down, a position which had at first been very fatiguing, but to which he was now accustomed, by the embers of the fire before it, and thought over what had best be done. For himself, he felt sure that he could make his escape, for though a general watch might be kept, one man could doubtless crawl away in the darkness. But he felt that he could not abandon the sheik in a moment of danger. It was, in fact, owing to himself that the sheik was now in this present position. It was true that the Arab had refused to give him up to the Mahdi's people at Metemmah, not from any love towards him, but of his own obstinate and headstrong disposition. However, that refusal, whatever its motive, had undoubtedly saved his life, and, moreover, the sheik had behaved with great kindness to him since, and he felt that it was clearly his duty to do all in his power to assist him now. But how? It was upwards of an hour before he rose from the fire and again entered the sheik's tent. The sheik was sitting smoking gravely. Amina was baking some bread over the embers in the middle of the tent. "What is your counsel, Muley?" she asked. "I see no plan," he said, "by which my lord can get away with all his followers and camels. One or two might steal out from the camp, and I thought at first that if Yussuf and myself, who would not be so closely watched as he will be, for there are 2 sentries outside the tent, could manage to steal out with our guns and to open fire in the darkness upon the camp, the Mahdists, thinking they were attacked, would seize their arms and run out, and in the confusion my lord and you and some of the others might make their escape. But this plan is full of danger, and it might not succeed, for they might suspect that those who attacked them were of your party, and a portion would remain to keep guard over you. This, then, should be the last resource, for if the attempt was made and failed, escape would be more difficult than ever. It appears to me that the first thing to do is to try and bribe the chief. At present he only suspects you of trading without a license, and were my lord to see him and to offer him half the camels and the burdens, to let him go free with the remainder, he might accept it. If that failed, we can still try my plan. I would take my gun and crawl out with Yussuf. I would go 200 or 300 yards away to the right, and would then fire as quickly as I could, moving while I did so so that they might think that there were many attacking them. Then, my lord, in the confusion, you and your wife, with the child, should try to make your escape. As soon as the camp is aroused and they are advancing against us, we would move round to the left of the camp, and you would join us there and make straight across the country and be far away by daylight." "But how could we travel without camels?" the sheik broke in impatiently. "They would surely overtake us before long." "There are deserted villages in which we might hide until the pursuit is over," Edgar said. "As they would gain all the camels and goods, it would matter little to them that 3 or 4 persons had escaped." "Not until they reached El Obed," the sheik said. "Then they would learn who we were, and would scour the country for us. Camels we must have if we are to escape. Besides, I should be a ruined man, and might as well be killed at once." "Not altogether ruined, sheik," Edgar said. "You remember that we buried many of your valuables and arms at the wady." "We could never get there without camels," the sheik said gloomily. "It might be done, sheik. Several men accompanied the camels on foot, and we could perform the journey so on our way back. But I should not counsel that. My idea was that we should get as far away from here as possible, and should then leave your wife and child in some village. We could take with us goods which would be quite sufficient to ensure a welcome for her until you return. Then I should propose that you and I, with Yusuf, who is certainly faithful, should make our way down on foot as Arab fighting men to Berber, and then on to Osman Digma, who is, we know, close to Suakim. Thence we might readily find means of escaping him and entering the town, and then, as I told you, I can promise you a ransom that would enable you to buy more camels and goods than you have lost here, to return to your wife and child and take them with you to your wady. As to camels, I do not altogether despair of getting some. They are, as usual, grazing outside the camp. They know Yusuf's voice and mine, and when we first escape, we might lead 4 of them away and take them to the left of the camp, where you are afterwards to meet us. Before morning we could be very many miles away." "Ah, if you could do that," the chief said, showing for the first time a lively interest in the matter. "It might be possible. However, I will try first of all if the officer will accept a bribe. If he will do so, it will give us 2 days' start, and we can then arrange matters as you say." Without another word he rose and went to the door of the tent. The 2 sentries placed there stepped forward and told him that their orders were that he was not to leave it. "I wish not to leave it," he said. "I desire only to speak to your commander. I have something of importance to say to him. Will you pray him to come to me?" One of the sentries at once went across to the commander's tent and shortly returned with him. "Master," the sheik said, "I have done wrong in journeying without a license, but I came from the desert and did not know the law. I must pay for my fault, though I cannot think that the commander at El Obed would be hard upon one who has erred from ignorance. However, as it is urgent for me to press on my journey, I will relinquish to you 1/3 of my camels and their burdens, if you will let us travel on with the others, and give us a permit from yourself, so that none may molest us in the future." As the officer had no suspicion that the Arab's first story was untrue, he hesitated. Then he said, "Not so. All your camels are forfeited for breaking the laws of the Mahdi." "But those who err in ignorance are surely not punished like those who err wilfully," the sheik urged. "But I am pressed for time. I am journeying south to the tents of my wife's father, who has sent to say that he is sick unto death, and wishes to see her before he dies. Be content, my lord, and take half the camels." The officer thought that the offer was a good one. It was probable that the governor of El Obed would not fine the Arab more than half his camels, seeing that he had broken the law inadvertently, and in that case he himself would have but a small share in the spoil. Whereas, if he consented to the proposal, the camels would all fall to himself, saving one or two he might give to his officers to induce them to keep silence as to the affair. "I will be more merciful than you deserve, Arab," he said. "I will take half your camels with their loads. But see that you cheat me not. If you do, it will be worse for you. Divide the animals and goods tomorrow morning in 2 equal parts. I will take that which pleases me most. I have spoken." And turning upon his heel, he went back to his tent. Edgar, standing within, heard the conversation. "You have heard," the sheik said when he had entered. "Half my property is gone, but I have freedom and the other half. I have had worse misfortunes than this. So far your counsel has turned out well, Muley. Now about the future. We shall have but 4 days' start. He will reach El Obeid by evening the day after tomorrow. There he will hear that he has let slip through his fingers the man for whom all the country is in search, and horsemen will be dispatched instantly in pursuit. Probably they will be here the next evening. It is but a reprieve. Journey as fast as we will, they will soon overtake us." "Yes, if we pursue our course in the same direction, sheik. But this we must not do. I should say that as soon as the division is made we should start south. It is as well that they should see the direction in which we are travelling. Then as soon as we are well out of sight of the camp, I should say let us break up the party into 6 or 8 parts, and bid them travel in different directions, east and west, and then make to the point where we arrived from the desert, and strike across to the wadi. A party like ours would be noticed at once, but 2 or 3 persons each, with a camel carrying their belongings, would be scarce observed, and the Mahdi's horsemen, asking if a caravan of 10 camels had passed, would be told that no such party had been seen. At any rate, most of your men would be able to regain the wadi, and there to await your return. Then I should propose that you on one camel and your wife and child on another, with such goods as you require to pay your way, with myself on foot dressed as formerly as a slave, should strike in the direction of Khartoum, but keeping this side of the river until we reach Berber. Of course you could take Yussuf with you or not, as you might choose, but I think that you would find him useful." "You would like him to go?" the sheik answered in a tone of suspicion, for it flashed across him that if Edgar and Yussuf made common cause he would be at their mercy. "I should like him to go, sheik. The negro has always been civil and obliging to me from the day when I thrashed his companion, and if, when we arrive at a port on the Red Sea, you are willing to part with him, I will gladly arrange to buy him of you at any reasonable price that you might name." "So be it," the sheik said. "The matter is settled." Next morning the sheik and his followers were on foot early. They divided the camels with the greatest care into 2 portions, debating earnestly on the merits of each animal. Then the goods, which were of but trifling value, were also divided. When all was done the Mahdi's officer came down and closely inspected both lots of animals. "There is nothing to choose between them," he said. "You have made a just division. I will take the right-hand lot, and the horse is of course mine." And to the disgust of the sheik he ordered one of the followers to take it to his tent. "Here is a permit for you to journey and trade as you will." The soldiers were already under arms. The Arabs hastily packed their tents and cooking pots on the camels that remained to them, and the 2 parties set off almost at the same instant in 2 opposite directions. When they had travelled for an hour, the sheik halted his caravan and explained the situation to his followers. "As soon as the Mahdists reach the town they will hear of us, and hot pursuit will be instantly set on foot. Therefore it is necessary for the present to abandon our plans and for you to return at once to the wadi from which we started. But if our pursuers obtain news of a caravan of our size, they will be sure to overtake us. Therefore it is also necessary that we should separate at once. Let each man, therefore, take his camel, his wife, and his belongings, and journey singly. Let some go east and some west, and making a circuit to avoid El Obed, reach the edge of the desert as best you may. Do not wait there for each other, but let each, as he reaches it, strike across to the wells. When you reach the wadi, wait there for me. I will go with my wife and Muley and Yusuf. We shall take 2 camels and journey north. There I hope to obtain a sum for the surrender of Muley, which will more than repay us the loss we have suffered today." The Arabs at once obeyed the orders of the sheik, and in a few minutes were speeding across the country. "We will go on for another 3 or 4 hours' march," the sheik said, "before we turn to the east. Our pursuers will be sure to inquire for us at every place they pass, and if they hear that solitary camel men have been seen making their way across the country, they will turn off at once in pursuit. It is therefore better that they should move off some distance before we turn off." The sheik had chosen 2 camels which, though not remarkable for their looks, were of better blood than the rest, and more capable of performing long journeys. He and his wife and child rode on one of the animals, Edgar with Yusuf behind him on the other. At noon they turned off from the southern course they had before been pursuing. They continued their journey until long after sunset, and then halted for a few hours to rest the camels. The moon rose at 8 o'clock, and as soon as it was up they started again, travelling now in a northeasterly direction in order to throw their pursuers off their track. At daybreak they halted again, this time in a grove. A fire was lit, and Yusuf cooked some meal cakes, and a bountiful feed of grain was given to each animal. As speed was less an object than secrecy, no move was made until nightfall, in order that they might pass through the villages unobserved. The journey was continued until the following morning, when they again halted. They were now following a track which would, the sheik said, lead them after a few miles into the main road between El Obed and Khartoum. This time the halt was of but a few hours' duration, as they hoped that they had baffled their pursuers and could now travel without attracting any special attention. They had reached the road and were proceeding along it when Yusuf saw dust rising in the distance. He called the attention of the sheik to it, and the camels were pressed forward to their utmost speed. But camels will seldom go far beyond their accustomed walk, and it soon became apparent that they were being rapidly overtaken by the strangers who were pressing on behind. By this time it could be seen that the party following them were also mounted on camels. 2 riders had detached themselves from the main body and were coming on at a rapid pace. "They must be mounted on heiries," the sheik said. "See how they come along. There is no avoiding them." "They are not the Mahdi's men," Yusuf said presently. "I can see by their dress that they are in Arab robes." "They are riding for a purpose," the sheik said, "or they would not travel so fast. And yet if their purpose were hostile they would hardly leave their followers so far behind. If they know aught of El Bakhat, they will know that he is not a man to surrender without resistance. Prepare your gun, Muley. Methinks there are but 2 men with the 4 camels behind, and if we slay these first we shall have no difficulty with them." The strangers came rapidly up, and as they approached the sheik saw that they were an Arab trader and a wild-looking native. As they came up they reined in their camels, and the trader gave the usual Arab salutation, which was responded to by the sheik. 2 or 3 of the usual ceremonial sentences were repeated on both sides. "My brother's name is El Bakhat," the newcomer said. "My name is my own," the sheik replied, "and is no concern of strangers." "I come as a friend," the Arab said. "I arrived at El Obed yesterday and heard that a body of horsemen had set out in pursuit of you. Yesterday evening some returned with a prisoner who said that your party had separated and that you were traveling north. 2 parties of horsemen were ordered to start at daybreak. Thinking that you might make for Khartoum, I set out at once to warn you." By this time the wild-looking young native had slipped from his camel and walked up to Edgar, staring fixedly at him. Edgar, not knowing what to make of the movement, shifted his rifle forward, when the native gave a wild cry. "Edgar!" Edgar gazed at him with stupefaction. It was Rupert's voice. But how could this wild figure be Rupert? How could he be here? "Edgar, do you not know me? I am Rupert." Edgar could doubt no longer. He flung himself from his camel and rushed into his brother's arms. "Am I mad or dreaming?" he exclaimed, as he still failed altogether to recognize Rupert in his disguise. "It is Rupert's voice, surely, but it cannot be Rupert." "It is me, sure enough, Edgar, and you are neither mad nor dreaming." "But this hair," Edgar said, still bewildered, gazing at the wild, unkempt locks. "It is a wig, neither more nor less, Edgar, made for me at Cairo, and a first-rate job too." Edgar could doubt no longer, but with the certainty and joy a certain weakness seemed to come over him, and he would have fallen had not Rupert seized him. "Stand up, old boy. It is all right and natural enough. We heard at Metemmeh of your having been carried away, and as, of course, I wasn't going to let you remain a slave among these fellows, I got leave of absence from Wolseley, got a disguise and a first-rate guide, and, thank God, I have come to you at last." The surprise of El Bakhat at seeing this meeting between Muley and this young native was much greater than that of the other Arab, who had heard at El Obed the evening before that the white slave was journeying in disguise with his captor. "This is my brother, Sheik," Edgar said to him. "He has come all this way in disguise to look for and rescue me." "He has done well," the sheik said warmly, while Amina clapped her hands in pleasure. "Is the story about the pursuit after us true?" Edgar asked. "Yes, quite true. The horsemen will not be many hours before they overtake us." A hurried consultation was held between the 2 sheiks, and it was decided to strike off to the southeast again, and as soon as the followers arrived with the camels, the united parties left the road and made across the country, Edgar taking his place on the camel behind Rupert. He still felt like one in a dream, and even now could scarce believe that it was really Rupert who was riding before him. The latter, who had been looking forward to the meeting, was yet scarcely less surprised at what had taken place. It had seemed such a hopeless task looking for Edgar over so wide an expanse of country that he could scarcely credit that he had succeeded in finding him. And for a time the feelings were so deep on both sides that hardly a word was spoken. It was not indeed until the camels came to a halt late in the evening that they began to talk naturally. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21 of Dash for Khartoum. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dion Gines, Salt Lake City, Utah. Dash for Khartoum by George Alfred Henty. Chapter 21. Home. "You are a nice fellow, aren't you, Edgar, to give us all this trouble," Rupert said, as he held him at arm's length and gazed at him in the light of the fire that Yussuf had lighted. "I see now that I made an awful ass of myself," Edgar said, "but I think you would have done the same if you had been in my place, Rupert, and had heard what I heard." "I have no doubt I should," Rupert agreed. "It must have been an awful thing to hear. Still, you must have seen by the advertisements that father did not believe the woman's story." "I did not see the advertisements," Edgar said. "I would not look at a paper, because I thought he would advertise for me to come back, and I felt I could not do so. and it would have been harder to keep away if I had seen them. You told me they were all well at home." This was the first question he had asked after he had mounted Rupert's camel. "Quite well when I last heard. I wrote and told them all about you." "Then the sergeant was found and did not die?" "He died the first day after we found him," Rupert said gravely. "He was insensible when we discovered him, and I should have known nothing about him if they hadn't found 2 letters upon him, one to me and one to father, saying that his wife's story was a lie, and that he could swear that neither of them could in any way identify either of us from the other. He recovered consciousness before he died and signed in the presence of witnesses a deposition to the same effect. So you saw me at Corti, Edgar, and would not make yourself known? I would not have believed it of you." "Well, you see, Rupert, I did not know at the time that the sergeant was who he was, and still believed the woman's story to be true. Besides, I had gone my own way, and did not mean to see any of you again until I had got on and could do without assistance. It seemed to me to be like asking for help, and after all that I had had under false pretenses, I would have rather died than do that." "But you see, it wasn't under false pretenses, Edgar, and you had as much right to consider yourself father's son as I had. You must have known that from the sergeant afterwards." "Yes, I did learn that," Edgar allowed, "but I think that made me even more disinclined than before to show myself. It would have looked as if I had come back only to put in a claim. You are the most pig-headed fellow I ever saw, Edgar. However, I hope you have got out of all that feeling now." "Quite, Rupert. I am quite ready to go back with you and beg their pardon at home for all the trouble I have given them. And to think that you have run all this awful risk to find me." "Stuff and nonsense, Edgar. When I found that you had been carried away as a slave, as a matter of course I determined to get you out as soon as possible, just as you would have done had I been caught by them. But I could have done nothing if it hadn't been for this Arab I am travelling with. Of course he will be well paid, but still men are often tempted to be unfaithful, however well they are paid." And then he went on to tell Edgar of the arrangement that had been made with the sheik. Edgar in return gave him a short sketch of his life since they had parted at Cheltenham, and told him of the promises he had made to El Bakhat if he would take him down to one of the Red Sea ports. "I suppose they are discussing the matter together," he said, glancing at the 2 Arabs, who were deep in conversation on the other side of the fire. "Well, sheik, what plan have you determined upon?" "We both think that it will be impossible for us to travel north either to Egypt or to Berber and thence to Suakim. They will be on the watch for us everywhere. Our best plan will be to make for Massowah." "Well, sheik, you have heard that Ben Ibn has agreed to deliver us at one of the ports for a handsome reward. He knows that Englishmen's words can be relied upon, and that there is no fear of his not getting the amount promised him. My brother and I agree to give you an equal sum to that which he will receive there." "He has not told me the sum," El Bakhat said. "Tell him the terms, Ben Ibn," Rupert put in. "Not, of course, those you have already received for your expenses, but the sum that is to be paid you when you arrive at a port." The sheik repeated the terms to El Bakhat, who at once expressed himself as perfectly satisfied with them. "The English are rich and generous," he said. "El Bakhat will do his best to take them where they wish to go." "Are you thinking of travelling with all this train?" Rupert asked Ben Ibn. "No, there is no occasion to do so. I have friends at a village on the Nile, and there my followers and their camels will remain, and El Bakhat's wife and child will remain with them also. We 4 will then travel on alone, taking with us Yussuf to cook for us and look after the camels. We shall separate from the others at once, as it will be much safer to travel in 2 small parties. There will be no fear as to their safety, as they will take my regular permit to trade, and no one will connect them in any way with El Bakhat. You and your brother will ride the heiries. I have a half-bred camel that will carry me well, although it will not compare in speed with yours. El Bakhat's camel is also a good one. If we are pursued, we have agreed that our best plan will be to turn off and find a hiding place, and for you to push on alone. On those camels you may defy pursuit. If pushed, they will travel 150 miles a day. When you get to Massawa, you will wait until we join you there. We are content to trust to your word. Still, we hope that we may keep together, for although your brother now speaks Arabic so well that he could pass as a native in casual conversation, it is better that we should be together, in which case it will be we who will do the talking." "Have you two heiries?" Edgar asked Rupert. "They are not quite full bred. It is very rare to meet with them, and the price is extremely high, but these are nearly full bred, and can swing along as fast as a horse can trot, and keep it up for 12 hours at a stretch." The march was resumed at midnight. The two sheiks rode ahead, Edgar and Rupert followed on the heiries, while Yussuf was mounted on one of the spare camels, and rode with the other Arab in the rear. The two brothers talked by turns, and both were surprised when the first streak of daylight appeared. The party now separated, the sheik's wife and child taking their seats on one of the camels. She took a warm farewell of Edgar. "Amina will never forget the young white man who has lived in her tents," she said. "He is brave in war, and is a wise counselor. He will be a great man among his own people." "And I shall never forget you," Edgar replied, "and your kindness to the white slave. When the sheik returns from Massawa, he will bring with him tokens of my remembrance." As soon as the party had separated, the sheiks put their camels to their best speed. Yussuf had been taken up by Edgar and rode behind him, the heiries carrying the double weight with ease. At sunset they halted. "We are now," El Bakhat said to Edgar, "beyond the reach of pursuit. We may be stopped and arrested by others, but those from El Obeid will never see the tails of our camels." "I wish," Edgar said, as they were riding along the next morning, "that you would get rid of that wig and your dye for 5 minutes, Rupert, so that I could see what you really look like. You are such an awful object with that bush of hair that I do not seem to recognize you at all. It is different with me. I am only brown, while you are a sort of dirty black, and when this cloth round my head is off, you really see me as I am. We should not have known each other by our figures. It is nearly 3 years since you left Cheltenham, and of course we have both widened out a lot since then. You have widened more than I have, but I have grown most. Yes, you are quite 2 inches taller than I am, Rupert. What are you, 6 feet? About half an inch under. Ah, then you are just the 2 inches taller. I am 40, chest measurement. I am not more than 37, Edgar. Ah, I expect you will be 40 before you have done, Rupert. You see, neither of us is anything like his full width yet. I have had harder work than you have." "Ah, Edgar, if we could both play in the house team now, it would make a difference, wouldn't it? You remember how Skinner was always lamenting our want of weight." "I don't think," Edgar said with a laugh, "that he has gained much in weight. He was about our size before, but he looked to me quite a little chap when I saw him on the march." "He is tough," Rupert said. "He is like whipcord all over. He is a capital fellow, not a bit changed. Easton has turned out first rate. He was awfully good to me after you went away, and took no end of pains to cheer me up. Had me down to his place in the holidays, and was a real friend. He is a big fellow now, and in another 2 or 3 years will make a splendid man. They will be delighted when we both turn up again. I don't think either of them thought, when they said good-bye to me, that I should ever get back. They thought the language would floor me, I think. You have got on wonderfully that way. I thought I had picked it up pretty quickly, but you jaw away as if you had been years at it." "I have been more with them, Rupert, Besides, I had picked up a little in the year I was at Cairo. You see, I had nearly 4 months' start of you, and in the life I led among them, of course I had a lot more occasion to talk than you have had, always on camel-back, and only talking in the encampment at night. El Bakhat says that in a casual conversation now no one would notice that I was not a native. So if we do get into any mess and have to ride for it by ourselves, we shall have no difficulty in making our way across the country. But I do not see much chance of that. If we should fall in with the Mahdists, your sheik can give his name and appear to be the head of the party, and as there is nothing against him, I don't see why we should have any trouble. I dare say we shall fall in with some Mahdists, Rupert said. I got up the maps thoroughly before I started, and specially studied the routes leading to the coast. I fancy the line we shall travel will take us down by Kassala. The Mahdists were besieging it, but I don't know whether it has fallen or not. The safest route would certainly be to go through Abyssinia, but the Arabs wouldn't like to travel that way if they could help it. There have been troubles for years between Abyssinia and the Sudan, and it is by no means certain what sort of treatment we should meet if we got there. Massawa is certainly the best place to strike for. Suakim would have been the best place in some respects, because there are lots of English there, and we should have no difficulty in getting money to pay the sheiks. But after all, it is only a question of a week or two's delay at the most. I have letters from my father authorizing me to draw upon him for any amount, and if we cannot get it at Massawa, we shall only have to send up to the officer in command at Suakim. He would cash a draft out of the pay chest, or if he could not do it that way, would get some merchant there to do it. They no longer hurried, but made moderate marches, stopping only at small villages. There was no difficulty in obtaining food and shelter, as Rupert's conductor had brought on with him a sufficient store of merchandise to pay their way down to the coast. On these occasions Edgar and Rupert kept in the background looking after the camels, while Yussuf waited upon the sheiks, and afterwards cooked a meal for the two Englishmen. He did most of the talking with the poorer villagers, gossiped with them about the state of the country, the chance of peace being re-established, and retailed all sorts of wonderful stories of the doings of the Mahdists. Both branches of the Nile were crossed in their journey, but no incident of any kind occurred until they had passed the eastern arm. They were now getting into a more dangerous country. Bodies of the Mahdi's troops going to and from Kassala, which had, they learned, at last surrendered, were encountered, and questions were asked as to where they were going and what was the object of their journey. Upon these occasions Ben Ibn acted as spokesman, and represented that they had friends among the Hadendoa tribesmen, and wished to learn whether any trade could be opened with the coast. When, within a day's march of Kassala, they met a number of camels laden with spoil from that town on their way to Khartoum, accompanied by a number of foot soldiers and 10 or 12 horsemen. Riding 20 or 30 yards behind the sheiks, Edgar saw one of the horsemen look earnestly at El Bakhat, and then spur forward to speak to the others, who were a short distance ahead. "That fellow has recognized El Bakhat," he exclaimed. "Ride on, Rupert." They both shook the halters, and the heiries broke into a trot. "Ride, sheiks," Edgar exclaimed as he came up to the others. "One of the horsemen has recognized El Bakhat." A minute or two later they heard a shout behind them, but paid no attention. "We have got 400 or 500 yards start," Rupert said, looking back, "but the horsemen will overtake us. They can go faster than the camels for a burst. Ride, sheik," he said. "Push on to the utmost. If we can get a mile away from the footmen before they come up to us, we can thrash the horsemen." The start they had obtained while the man who had recognized El Bakhat was explaining to the others who he was, and how much his capture was desired at Khartoum, was invaluable to the fugitives, and the horsemen started in a body, shouting and yelling and firing their guns. The bullets whistled harmlessly round the fugitives. "Make for that clump of trees on rising ground," Edgar said. Then spring off the camels and fight them on foot. What arms have you, Rupert?" "I have 2 revolvers besides this rifle. You take one of them. We shall beat them off easily enough. They are only about 2 to 1. When they reached the trees they were but 100 yards ahead, and less than a mile from the caravan, which had halted when the horsemen commenced the pursuit. They leapt from their camels. "Do you hold their bridles, Yussuf?" Edgar said. "We will beat them off," and steadying his rifle against the trunk of a tree, he fired at the nearest horseman, who fell instantly from the saddle. Rupert's rifle cracked a moment later, and the 2 sheiks added their fire. Had the horsemen been coming up in a close body, they would have gained the wood, for the leader was but 50 yards away when Edgar fired. But they were scattered, and the leaders being shot down, the others wheeled their horses and galloped back towards the caravan at full speed. "Now we will be off again," Rupert said, and in a minute they had mounted and continued their flight. "There is no fear of the footmen overtaking us," Ben Ibn remarked. "Our camels are not like yours, but they can trot at a good pace for 40 miles. It is fortunate we had them, for they would soon have been up to them had we only had common camels. Of course we must strike off straight for Massowah now. The danger is not over. Some of the horsemen will bear the news to Kassala, and a troop will be sent out in pursuit of us. It is well that we have journeyed quietly, and that the beasts are in good condition." Hour after hour passed. The camels kept on with unswerving gait until long after nightfall. "My beast smells water," Ben Ibn said, as his camel, after waving his head backwards and forwards, suddenly quickened its pace. Another quarter of an hour they stopped at a small pool, in what, during the rainy season, was the bed of a river, and here they halted. The camels, having drunk their fill, were given an ample allowance of corn from the saddlebags, and were then picketed close at hand, while Yussuf prepared a meal for their masters. "What is the country like that we have to traverse?" Edgar asked. "By tomorrow night," Ben Ibn said, "we shall have reached the mountains. We are on very high land now, and have a great descent to make to reach the coast. We must inquire the way to the pass by which the road from Kassala descends to Massowah. If we strike it without failure we shall be safe, but if we miss our way and the horsemen from Kassala get there first, we shall be in a bad position. They will have heard of our arms and strength, and are sure to have too strong a force for us to attack. If we fail to find the road at once, our best plan would be to turn and travel north until we reach a road going down to Suakim." "Would that one of us had travelled here before," El Bakhat said. "If we could but have continued our journey tonight we should be safe. Upon the desert one can travel by the stars, but the ground is getting far too broken to cross at night. We should only weary our camels in vain." "How far is it to the gorge you speak of, El Bakhat?" "I know not for certain. Those who travel the road have told me that it is 3 or 4 days' journey with laden camels from Kassala. Our camels can easily do 3 days' march in one, and if we have the good fortune to strike the road near the mouth of the pass, we may pass through it before dark tomorrow. But by that time they may be there from Kassala." "Well, I suppose we must take our chances," Rupert said. He and Edgar soon lay down and were fast asleep, but the 2 Arabs talked together for a long time before they followed their example. At daybreak the party were on their feet. "We talked it over last night," Ben Ibn said, "and we both think that it were best not to proceed. The horsemen would have reached the town with the news 3 hours after noon, and had they sent off at once horsemen and fast camelmen down the road to Massowah, we think that they would be at the pass before we could possibly reach it. Had we known the country and could have travelled all night, we should have been there long before them. As it is, the risk would be too great. We are already some distance north of the Massowah road, and it will not be so many days longer a journey to Suakim than to Massowah. Osman Digma is lying at Handoub and Tamay, so we cannot come down by the Berber road. but there are passes by which we can descend to the low country near Tokar. Once down there, we can cross from the foot of the hills to the sea by night, and then follow the coast until we arrive at Suakim." "I think that is the best plan, Sheik," Edgar said. "A few days will make no difference, and it would be as well to avoid all risks." Accordingly, on mounting, the camels' heads were turned to the northeast. Yussuf rode behind Rupert and Edgar by turns, so as to divide the labour between the two heiries. A few villages were passed, but the inhabitants fled into their houses or into the fields on seeing the approach of the party, the arrival of strangers meaning extortion and demands for tribute. So they journeyed for several days, until one afternoon they came to a large village, which was evidently inhabited. They alighted and knocked at the door of the principal house. No answer was at first returned, but on El Bakhat shouting that he would break down the door if it was not opened, bolts were heard to unfasten. The door opened, and an old man presented himself. "Why did you not reply to our knocking?" El Bakhat asked angrily. "Is this your hospitality to strangers?" "My lord must pardon me," he said submissively, "but it was but last week that a party of the Mahdi's soldiers came along here and stripped the village of all it possessed, and drove off its bullocks and sheep. Save our grain, we have naught that we can call our own." "We do not belong to the Mahdi," Ben Ibn said, "but are peaceful travellers. We desire only to fill our bags with grain for the animals, for which we will pay you the full value. For ourselves we need nothing, although if you have, peradventure, a kid or a sheep left among you, we will gladly purchase it." "Enter, my lord," the old man replied briskly, evidently much relieved at the announcement. "All that the village still possesses is at your service." He gave an order, and a boy brought out a basket of grain, which he emptied before the camels, while the two Arabs, Edgar and Rupert, entered the house. 10 minutes later a villager brought in a freshly killed kid, which Yussuf, after lighting a fire in the courtyard, proceeded to cut up and cook. In the meantime the Arabs had entered into a conversation with the peasant as to the routes down to the sea. They learned that so far they had been coming in the right direction, and that some 30 miles farther they would come upon a track leading down to Tokar. "You must look well for it," he said. "It is never greatly traversed, and since the troubles all trade has ceased, and you may well cross the track without noticing it." "Have you any in the village who know the track?" Edgar asked. "There are several here who have been down to Tokar, my lord." "We will give 10 yards of good cloth to one who will go and set us on the road. We will take him behind one of our camels, and as we shall start at daybreak, he can be back here before nightfall. I suppose when we once find the track, it will not be difficult to follow it." "I can doubtless find a guide," the peasant said. "He can give you instructions as to the path, or he could go with you, if you choose, still further, to show you the way. I will go and find you such a man." An active-looking young native presently arrived, and said that he was willing to be their guide to the point where the track left the highlands and entered the gorges leading down towards the sea. It was, he said, 4 days' camel march beyond the point where they would strike the track, and he would accompany them this distance for 40 yards of cotton cloth. The bargain was struck at once, and the following morning they started, the guide riding behind Edgar. As there was no occasion for haste, and the camels might be required to exert their utmost speed when they reached the low country, the journey was performed by 3 easy stages, the distances being about 40 miles each day. It was well that they had a guide with them, for the track was in most places entirely obliterated. "You cannot miss your way now," the natives said at their last halting place by some shallow wells. "This depression leads straight down to the pass. It is 2 days' march hence to the lower plains. When the valley at last opens on them, you will be about 10 miles west of Tokar." The next morning the guide started on his return journey. The cloth had been given to him before starting, and he now carried a few pounds of grain and a small bag of dried dates for his 5 days' journey back to his village. The journey down the gorges was an arduous one. The path had been swept away by the last season's rains, and in some places, where the valley narrowed to a gorge but a few yards wide, with the rocks rising sheer up hundreds of feet on either side, the bottom was filled with large blocks of stone brought down by the floods, whose highest level could be seen 40 or 50 feet above them on the rocks. Occasionally it was necessary to build a sloping platform with small boulders of stones to enable the camels to get over the vast blocks that filled the space between the walls. It took them 3 days of arduous labor, but the valley at last opened out, and they saw a broad expanse of country stretching before them. No one had either met or passed them on the way down, but here in the lower valley there were several flocks of sheep and goats watched over by Arab boys. These, at the sight of strangers, hastily collected their animals and drove them up the hillside, but at a shout from Ben Ibn, saying that they were friends and would do them no harm, 2 of them presently came down. On hearing that the travellers intended to camp for the night, they led the way to the wells, and for 3 yards of cotton killed and brought in a sheep. Presently the rest of the lads came down and squatted near the fire that Yusuf had kindled, and after the party had dined, were rejoiced by the present of some wheaten cakes and a portion of the cooked meat. They now became very communicative. They belonged to the Hadendoa tribe. There were 300 or 400 of the dervishes at Tokar. Osman Digma had in all 4,000 or 5,000 men at Handoub, and was soon going to drive the Kafirs into the sea. Many of their tribe were with him, but others were disheartened at the long delay to carry his promise into effect. They had lost, too, a great many of their best fighting men in the battles with the Kafirs, but no doubt when Osman Digma announced that the favorable time had arrived, all would again join him in order to have their share of the plunder of Suakim. The next day they stopped at the wells, telling the boys that the camels were sorely wearied by their journey down the gorge, and that they needed a day's rest. In the evening, as soon as the meal was over, they mounted their camels, much to the surprise of the native boys, and started. Edgar could judge of the general position, for though he had not been as far as Tokar, he could tell pretty well the line they should take to come down upon Trinkitat. As soon as they were fairly out of the valley, the camels were put to their full speed, and in 4 hours the shining sea in the bright moonlight lay before them. Crossing a shallow lagoon, they were upon the sandy beach. The pace of the camels was now slackened, as it was useless to arrive at Suakim before daybreak, as they would have been liable to be shot by the sentries in the forts if they approached in the darkness. When day broke, Edgar and Rupert gave a shout of joy, for 3 or 4 miles away could be seen the masts of shipping. Again the camels broke into a trot, and in half an hour they approached the forts raised to defend the town on the land side from the attacks by Osman Digma's followers. No questions were asked them, for natives belonging to friendly tribes frequently entered or left the town. As they crossed the ground between the forts and the town, they saw a party of marines marching out to relieve those who had occupied the fort at night. They reined in their camels, and Rupert addressed the officer marching at the head of the party. "Can you tell me, sir, if Lieutenant Skinner is at Suakim at present?" The officer was astounded at being thus addressed in pure English by a wild-looking native, and the men following him were no less astonished. "Is it possible," the officer exclaimed, "that you are Mr. Clinton?" "That is my name," Rupert replied. The officer advanced and grasped his hand warmly. "I am glad indeed to see you," he said. "Skinner is my subaltern, and has often spoken to me of what he considered your hopeless journey to try to find your brother, and said that if you did get through it alive, you were as likely as not to turn up here. I congratulate you indeed. Have you been successful? and he looked doubtfully at Rupert's companions. "Yes, thank God, I have succeeded. This is my brother Edgar." The officer shook hands warmly with Edgar, and even the men who had heard what was said raised a shout of welcome. "I forgot, Skinner is in the rear," the officer said, and raising his voice shouted his name. Skinner came running up. He had been wondering what the halt was for. Edgar and Rupert had dismounted by this time and ran forward to meet him. He stopped in surprise, and then recognized Rupert, whom he had already seen in his present disguise. "Clinton!" he exclaimed with a joyous shout. "Is it really you? Thank God! You have gotten back again." And this is Edgar," Rupert put in. For a minute or two the three stood shaking each other's hands, too excited and joyous to speak, while the soldiers cheered lustily. The captain in command came up. "Look here, Skinner, it would be too bad to take you away from your friends now, so I will take it upon myself to give you leave off duty. I will get Thompson to stay out until tomorrow morning in your place. He won't mind when I tell him why, and you can take his turn on duty on shore next time." Talking excitedly together, they entered the town, the Arabs following on their camels and Yusuf leading the two heiries. "The first thing to do," Skinner said, "is to get you rigged out decently. I suppose it will be some time before you can get rid of your dye, but at any rate you can get dressed like Christians, and you can get rid of that fearful wig, Rupert. I will send off a boat to my ship with a note, and they will soon send you on shore a couple of suits of clothes. Mine would be of no use. You could not get into them. This is the only hotel in the place. First of all, we must see about these Arabs being made comfortable. Where can they put up their camels?" "Oh, that will be all right," Skinner said. "One of the fellows here will take them under his charge." Skinner entered and came out with a servant. "You can put your camels in the courtyard here, El Bakhat," Edgar said, after speaking to the men. "Yusuf will look after them. You had better find a lodging for yourselves. You will be more at home there than you would here. Get everything you want. You will have no difficulty in finding everything in the Arab quarter. Skinner, lend me a sovereign, will you? We have been living on barter for a long time, but they will want money here." "This is worth $5, he said as he handed the money to El Bakhat. "But I forgot. Ben Ibn knows about the value of English money. If you will come here at noon, I may be able to tell you something about the money." They then entered the hotel with Skinner. "Get breakfast, the best you can get," Skinner ordered, "and show me to a room where there is plenty of water and towels. These are Englishmen, though you would not think so from their appearance." The young fellows enjoyed a thorough wash, and Rupert got rid of his wig, but they had to attire themselves in their former garments for breakfast. After existing for months upon native fare, the breakfast was a luxury indeed. By the time they had finished, the messenger Skinner sent off returned with 2 suits of clothes sent ashore by the officers of his ship, and having attired themselves in these, they went with Skinner to the political officer. When he understood who they were, he received them with much warmth. "I have had letters from Captain Clinton," he said, "respecting you, saying that it was possible that you might turn up here, and requesting me to assist you in getting any bills you might draw on him cashed. I will go with you to the principal merchant here. No doubt he will do it, but if not, I can manage the affair with one of the ship's paymasters." The merchant, however, was perfectly willing to honour their draft upon their father for £1,000 upon the statement of the officer that he would himself guarantee its payment, and he told them that his servants should bring the money in silver to the hotel. £400 was the amount that Ben Ibn had been promised on delivering Rupert in safety at one of the ports, and an equal sum was to be given to El Bakhat. This left them £200 for getting to England, for Edgar had learned that his regiment had a month previously sailed for India, and he considered that under the circumstances he was perfectly justified in reporting himself at the depot at home. The sheiks, on their arrival at the hotel, received with great satisfaction the bags of money containing the stipulated amount. To these were added a brace of revolvers each, being the 2 Rupert had carried and 2 they had purchased in Suakim, together with 10 boxes of ammunition. Edgar also gave to El Bakhat a set of jewelry and several silk scarves for Amina. "Now, sheik," he said, "I should like to purchase the freedom of Yusuf. What do you value him at?" "I will give him to you," the sheik said. "You have treated me well and honorably." "No, I will not have that, sheik. He is your property and is a very useful slave. I will give you $200 for him." "It is well," El Bakhat said. "He is yours." "Now," Rupert said, "there are the 2 heiries. They are yours by right, Ben Ibn, but I would fain give one to El Bakhat. I will give you $300 to forego your claim to it. I know the beast is worth more, but if you possess one of them it will suffice for your needs, and you will oblige me if you will part with the other." "I can refuse my lord nothing," Ben Ibn said, "and the possession of 2 such heiries might well draw envy and enmity upon me. I will accept his offer." "Then the other heirie is yours, El Bakhat," Rupert said, "as a special present from me for the kindness you have shown my brother. What do you both mean to do now?" "We have agreed to journey up the coast together, and then to travel across the mountains to Assouan, and there buy camels and goods, or we may buy them here if we see bargains to suit us. Then we shall turn south. I shall go on alone to Khartoum. I know many of the Mahdi's officers, and shall buy presents to them, obtain a pardon for El Bakhat, and permission for him to return to his tribe. Money will do as much among the Mahdi's people as elsewhere. We shall see you again tomorrow, sheiks. A steamer sails in the afternoon for Suez, and we shall go in her. Come here to say goodbye to us in the morning." When the sheiks had left, Yusuf was called in, and Edgar told him that he had purchased his freedom from El Bakhat. The negro threw himself on his knees in an ecstasy of delight, and poured out his thanks. "Now, what would you like to do, Yusuf?" Edgar went on, when the negro had quieted down. "I can recommend you here to some merchant as a faithful man whom he can trust. Or, if you would like to set up a shop here, I will give you $200 with which to trade. Or I can take you up with us to Suez and give you strong letters of recommendation with which you can obtain employment there." "No, my lord," Yusuf cried. "None of these things. I would go with you and be your servant. I will never leave you." "But I don't want a servant, Yusuf," Edgar said. "As I have told you, I am a soldier, and soldiers do not have servants." "Oh, that is nonsense," Rupert put in. "You are not going on as a private soldier. You know you need not reckon upon that, Edgar. You like the fellow, and there is no doubt he would make you a faithful servant. And anyhow, they could find something to do for him at home." Edgar pointed out to Yusuf that the life would be strange to him, the climate altogether different to that to which he was accustomed, and that he would find no one who could speak his language. But Yusuf was unmoved, and entreated so earnestly to be taken that Edgar gave in, saying that after all, if he repented afterwards, he could be sent back to Egypt. Just as this was settled, a messenger entered with a telegram from Captain Clinton, in answer to that they had dispatched before they had sat down to breakfast, announcing their safe arrival. It contained simply the words, "Thank God, come home at once." They went off to dinner with Skinner on board ship, and the story of their adventures excited immense interest among the officers. Skinner returned with them on shore, and remained with them until the steamer left in the afternoon. Yusuf, who had been rigged out in white trousers and jacket, a checked shirt and straw hat, accompanied them. The 2 sheiks saw them off, and stood looking after them with grave regret until the steamer was far from land. At Suez, Edgar and Rupert provided themselves with a stock of linen and clothing. 2 days later they took passage to Brindisi in a P&O steamer, and travelled rapidly across Europe. Their color excited much surprise among the passengers on board the steamer, but as they had no wish to keep on telling their story, they kept themselves apart and made no acquaintances during the short voyage. Yusuf was astounded at everything he saw, the ship and her machinery, the trains, the fertile country through which they traveled, the frequent villages and great towns. There was no stay in London. They drove across from Charing Cross to Paddington and went down by the first train. A telegram had been dispatched from Dover, and a carriage was at the station to meet them, and the servant handed Rupert a note. It contained a few words from his father, saying that he had not come to meet them, as he thought it better that they should all meet together at home. It was Edgar who received the first greeting from father, mother, and sister, while Rupert stood by, well content that his brother should on this occasion come first. It was little over a year since he had said good-bye to them, while it was more than 3 since Edgar had seen them. And his own greeting, though delayed for a moment, was no less warm than that of Edgar. "Father and mother," Edgar began, as soon as they turned again from Rupert, "I want to say that I feel how wrong I was." "Then don't say it," Captain Clinton broke in. "We won't talk about that time at all. You suffered, and we have all suffered, but good has come out of it. Thank God the matter is settled now forever, and we know there is nothing more to be found out about it, and that there is no fear of our ever having to look at one or other of you in a different light to that which we regard you, as our 2 sons, of both of whom we have every reason to be proud. There, now let us talk of other things. You have both gone through wonderful adventures, which we are burning to hear about." "You have changed a great deal, Edgar," Mrs. Clinton said. "Of course we have seen Rupert comparatively lately, but I think that you have changed more than he has from what you both were 3 years ago. You look older than he does, and your figure is more set." "He has gone through so much more," Rupert said. "He has been doing man's work for 3 years. I have only had a year and a half of it." "You need not be in a hurry to look old, Rupert," Captain Clinton laughed. "That will come soon enough. And you have widened out a good deal in this last year. You had got very weedy, and I am glad to see that you are filling up. I have some news for you, Edgar. I saw Lord Wolseley on his return to England, and he spoke very kindly of you both, and when I got your telegram from Suakim, I wrote to him again, and received a very warm letter of congratulation from him in reply. He told me that he had received a most favourable report of you from your colonel, who said that your conduct has been most exemplary since you had entered the regiment, and that as you had been recommended for the Victoria Cross, he had intended to recommend you for a commission as soon as you had served a qualifying time as a sergeant. But Lord Wolseley said that he thought it would be a great pity for you to lose 4 or 5 years' seniority by waiting to get your commission from the ranks, and that he had that morning spoken to the Duke of Cambridge about you, and that the latter had put your name down for a Queen's cadetship, so that if you could pass the mere qualifying examination, you could have a commission at once. There will be an examination in 2 months' time, and if you go up to a crammer and work hard, you will be able to brush up your schoolwork and get through. If not, of course, you can go in again 6 months later. I am afraid you will hardly get ready in time for the first." "I don't know, father," Rupert said, while Edgar expressed his lively satisfaction. "Edgar speaks Arabic like a native, and if he takes that up as a subject, he is sure to get full marks for it, and that will help him tremendously. Of course he would have no chance of getting through if he had to go in for the competition, but something like half the number of marks are enough for the qualifying examination." "Well, we mustn't be too sanguine," Captain Clinton said, "and 8 months' quiet study won't hurt him after campaigning in Egypt for 2 years. By the way, Edgar, I paid in the money for you to buy out, and sent in an application in your name. These things take some little time before they are carried out, but no doubt we shall hear soon. But in the meantime you had better write at once to the officer commanding your depot, saying that you have returned home, and asking for a month's leave of absence. You are sure to get your discharge before that is over." Edgar remained at home for a week, spending much of his time, however, over his old school books. Then he went up to town and worked at a crammer's until the examination came off, when, thanks in no small degree to the number of marks he obtained for his Arabic, he just managed to get the number necessary to qualify him. To his great satisfaction, he was at once gazetted to a regiment, as if he had been promoted from the ranks, instead of having to go through the course at Sandhurst, and thus gained several months' seniority. 3 months' leave was granted him, and at the end of that time he joined his regiment, which was stationed at Malta. No question as to which of the Clintons is the legitimate son of the captain and his wife has ever again troubled them. Edgar and Rupert know that they are equally dear to those at home, and all are happy in the knowledge that nothing henceforth can break the closeness of their tie, and that it can never be known which is the lawful heir of the estates. What is much more important to them both, neither of them can say which has the first claim on the love and affection of Captain and Mrs. Clinton, and of their sister. End of chapter 21. End of for Khartoum by George Alfred Henty.